The voting chamber fell silent as the Draven representative slammed his scaled fist against the podium. Around the circular room, delegates from 40 different species watched the display with varying degrees of interest. Most had seen this before. The Draven Empire making demands, smaller civilizations backing down, and the galactic order continuing as it always had for the past 3,000 years. Helen Bradford sat in the human section, a space barely large enough for 2 chairs. Earth had been part of the galactic community for 4 decades now, yet their presence still felt like an afterthought to most species. She listened as War Chief Gorath outlined his demands. Humanity would surrender administrative control of their 8 outer colonies. Draven forces would occupy these systems for what they called educational purposes. Earth would pay reparations for refusing previous Draven trade agreements. The terms were insulting, but Helen kept her face neutral. She had learned that skill during her 20 years in diplomatic service. Around her, she could hear the quiet conversations of other delegates. A Tellarian scientist whispered something that made his companion laugh. 2 Orinthian traders were already calculating how they might profit from human displacement. Gorath continued speaking, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had never been told no. His species had conquered 47 systems over the past century. Their military operated on a simple principle: show overwhelming force, demand submission, and most species would comply rather than face destruction. It had worked every single time. Helen raised her hand. The gesture was so unexpected that Gorath actually stopped mid-sentence. Several delegates turned to look at the human section, surprised that Earth's representative would dare interrupt. "War Chief Gorath," Helen said, her voice calm and clear. "Earth requests 72 hours to formulate our response to your generous offer." The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs. Gorath's facial scales shifted through colors that Helen's research had taught her indicated confusion mixed with anger. Generous offer. She had deliberately chosen those words. They made it clear she understood exactly what this was. "You dare mock the Draven Empire?" Gorath's voice rose loud enough that the chamber's acoustic systems struggled to compensate. "Not at all," Helen replied. "I simply believe such important matters deserve proper consideration. 72 hours, then you will have Earth's complete answer." A Tellarian delegate actually laughed out loud at that. The idea that humanity, with their handful of visible warships, would need 3 days to accept the obvious. Earth's military presence in the galaxy was well documented. 12 cruisers, 30 destroyers, and maybe 200 smaller craft spread across 9 systems, including their home world. The Draven fleet in this sector alone numbered in the thousands. Gorath seemed ready to refuse, but another Draven official whispered something to him. Helen caught the gesture. They were reminding him that galactic protocol did allow for brief deliberation periods. Denying it would make the Empire look unreasonable, and they still maintained the pretense of following civilized conventions. 72 hours, Gorath finally agreed. Then we expect full compliance. Refusal will result in what we term educational warfare. Your species will learn why the Draven Empire has never lost a conflict. Helen stood, gathering her data pad and the few documents she had brought. Other delegates were already leaving, their interest in Earth's response minimal. To them, this was a foregone conclusion. Humanity would surrender, pay whatever the Draven demanded, and the galaxy would continue as it always had. She walked through the corridors of the assembly station, passing representatives from species whose names she had memorized over the years. Some nodded politely. Most ignored her. Earth was new money in a galaxy of old powers. 40 years meant nothing to civilizations that measured their histories in millennia. Her personal quarters were small but functional. The station's designers had allocated space based on each species' perceived importance. Earth rated slightly better than the newest members, but nowhere near the established powers. Helen sat at her desk and pulled up her encrypted communication system. The message she composed was brief, just 6 words that she had been authorized to send only under specific circumstances. Her superiors on Earth had given her clear instructions. Wait until humanity was directly threatened with military action. Wait until the galactic community showed its true nature. Wait until there was no doubt that peaceful coexistence had been offered and rejected by the others. She typed the words carefully. Protocols are lifted. Show them what we built. The message encrypted itself using quantum keys that no known galactic technology could break. Earth's information security had always been surprisingly robust, another detail that other species had dismissed as lucky rather than skilled. The transmission lasted less than a second, a brief pulse that would reach Earth's deep space relay stations and then continue to its final destination. Helen leaned back in her chair and allowed herself a small smile. 72 hours. In that time, the galaxy would learn something important about humanity. They had assumed that Earth's 4 decades of quiet participation meant weakness. They had interpreted humanity's focus on building colonies and infrastructure as a lack of military ambition. They had believed that what they could see represented everything Earth had to offer. All of those assumptions were about to be proven spectacularly wrong. She thought about the teams working in the outer system, beyond Neptune's orbit, in the cold dark where no casual observer would think to look. She thought about 35 years of construction, of resources harvested from asteroids and moons, of humanity's best engineers solving problems that other species claimed were impossible. She thought about the 200,000 people who had kept the secret, who had trained and prepared and waited for this exact moment. The galaxy had laughed at Earth's 12 cruisers and 30 destroyers. They had dismissed humanity as newcomers playing at civilization. In 72 hours, they would understand their mistake. Helen pulled up the news feeds from various galactic networks. Already the story was spreading. The Draven Empire issues ultimatum to Earth. Human surrender expected within days. Minor species once again reminded of their place in galactic hierarchy. She read the commentary from various experts, all predicting Earth's inevitable capitulation. Not one of them suggested that humanity might refuse. Not one of them imagined that Earth had been preparing for exactly this scenario since the day they joined the galactic community. Her communication console chimed softly, a return message, just 2 words, en route. Helen stood and walked to the window of her quarters. Outside, stars stretched in all directions, ancient light from civilizations that had risen and fallen long before humanity discovered fire. The galaxy was old, comfortable in its established patterns, certain in its hierarchies. In 72 hours, all of that certainty would shatter. Numbers scrolled across Patricia O'Connor's display faster than most people could follow. She had spent 15 years learning to read these systems, understanding every fluctuation and variance. Around her, the control center hummed with activity as 300 engineers performed final checks on systems that had never been fully activated before. Reactor 7 showing green across all metrics. Someone called out from the power management station. Patricia acknowledged the report with a brief nod. 7 reactors, each one powerful enough to sustain a major city. Together, they produced more energy than some planetary grids, and they were just one component of the massive structure that surrounded them. Through the reinforced windows of the control center, she could see a portion of the hull stretching away into darkness. The Kuiper Belt had provided excellent cover for construction. Out here, beyond Neptune's orbit, casual scans picked up nothing but ice and rock. Nobody looked closely at the outer edges of solar systems. There was nothing valuable this far from the sun. Except Earth had built something valuable, something that would change everything. Launch Director, we're receiving the activation codes from Earth Command. Her communications officer looked up from his station, excitement barely contained in his voice. Patricia pulled up the message. Authorization confirmed. Timeline approved. Proceed with full system activation. She had waited years to see those words. All departments, this is launch control. Begin primary activation sequence. Mark time 60 minutes to full power. The control center erupted in controlled chaos. Engineers who had trained for this moment moved with practiced efficiency. Systems that had been dormant or running at minimal capacity began waking up. Throughout the massive structure, lights flickered on section by section, revealing the true scale of what humanity had accomplished. 47 kilometers. That was the length of the Terran United Space Command vessel Resilience. To put that in perspective, the largest Draven warship measured 3 kilometers from bow to stern. The biggest civilian transport in the galaxy, a Tellarian colony ship, reached 8 kilometers. Nothing in known space came close to what Earth had. Built in secret. Patricia walked through the control center, checking displays and confirming readings. Her team had built this station to manage a vessel that was more city than ship. The Resilience housed 200,000 personnel. It contained fabrication facilities capable of building everything from small components to entire vessels. Vertical farms produced enough food to sustain the population indefinitely. Schools educated children born during the construction phase. Medical facilities rivaled anything on Earth itself. Hangar Bay Alpha reporting ready status, another voice called out. All strike craft secured and prepped. Hangar Bay Alpha was just one of 12. Patricia pulled up the tactical display showing the fighter complement. 4,000 strike craft, sleek interceptors designed for speed and precision, heavy bombers carrying enough firepower to crack a moon, electronic warfare ships packed with systems that could blind enemy sensors or hack their communications, each one crewed by pilots who had trained in simulators so realistic they could fly combat missions in their sleep. Bay Beta confirms ready. Bay Gamma confirms ready. The reports continued as each section checked in. Beyond the fighters, the Resilience carried 600 support vessels, transports, repair ships, fuel tenders, and reconnaissance craft. A complete logistics fleet capable of sustaining extended operations far from any supply base. And docked in the 4 primary bays, 40 battlecruisers, each one larger than Earth's publicly known cruisers and bristling with weapons systems that incorporated lessons learned from studying every galactic conflict of the past 4 decades. Admiral Robert Hayes entered the control center, his uniform crisp despite the early hour. Patricia had worked with him since the project's inception. He had been a captain back then, commanding one of Earth's first deep space exploration vessels. Now he would command something unprecedented in human history. "Status, Director?" Hayes asked, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had prepared for this moment through years of planning. "All systems nominal, Admiral. We're 30 minutes from full power. The Resilience is ready to fly." Hayes nodded and walked to the central display. The tactical plot showed not just the carrier but the entire solar system. Earth glowed at the center, blue and green and beautiful. The 8 outer colonies appeared as small markers scattered across nearby systems. And approaching from deep space, the Draven fleet that thought it was coming to enforce an ultimatum. "They have no idea what they're about to see," Hayes said quietly. Patricia smiled. That was the beauty of humanity's approach. While other species had built their militaries publicly, staging demonstrations and showing off their power, Earth had worked in silence. Every resource devoted to the outer colonies had been carefully documented and explained. Mining operations in the asteroid belt, shipyards producing the small fleet of cruisers and destroyers that everyone knew about. All of it real, all of it verifiable. But out here, in the dark beyond the outer planets, humanity had been building something else entirely. They had taken their industrial capacity, refined through centuries of Earth-based construction, and applied it to a scale that seemed impossible. Modular design principles allowed sections to be built simultaneously and assembled in space. Automated systems reduced the crew requirements that would have made such a vessel impractical for other species. AI assistants coordinated the thousands of systems that had to work together seamlessly. "Final checks complete, Admiral. All departments report ready for transit." Patricia's voice remained steady despite the significance of the moment. Hayes moved to the command chair, a position he had sat in during simulations but never with full power flowing through every system. "Very well. Helm, plot a course for the caster system. Maximum speed. I want to arrive exactly 71 hours and 45 minutes from now." Course plotted and confirmed, Admiral. All hands, this is Admiral Hayes. Today we stop being the galaxy's joke. Today we show them what Earth built while they weren't paying attention. Engage faster than light drives. Let's introduce the resilience to the galaxy. The drives hummed to life, pulling power from the fusion antimatter hybrid reactors. Space around the massive vessel began to twist and fold. Patricia watched her displays as the carrier that had been hidden for 35 years prepared to step into the light. Through the windows, stars began to streak and blur. The Kuiper belt fell away behind them. Ahead lay a journey that would take them to the Galactic Assembly Station, where Earth's ambassador had bought them exactly enough time to arrive in the most dramatic fashion possible. The Resilience, all 47 kilometers of Earth's secret supercarrier, vanished from the outer solar system. When it emerged, the galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. Patricia allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. They had built a weapon powerful enough to stand against any fleet in known space. But more than that, they had built a symbol, proof that being underestimated was sometimes the greatest advantage of all. Sensor technician Rylath of the Tellarian Science Collective had worked at the Castor Assembly Station for 11 years. During that time, he had seen countless vessels arrive through faster-than-light travel. Merchant convoys, diplomatic transports, military fleets. Each one registered on his instruments with familiar signatures that his trained eyes could identify within seconds. The reading now appearing on his screen made no sense whatsoever. "Supervisor, I think we have a calibration error." Rylath adjusted his controls, running a quick diagnostic. The systems checked out perfectly. "No, wait, something large is approaching through FTL, very large." His supervisor, a veteran of 30 years, moved to examine the data. Her face went through several color shifts that among Tellarians indicated extreme confusion. "That cannot be right. Check the scale parameters." Rylath had already done that 3 times. "Scale is correct. Whatever is approaching has a mass reading equivalent to a small moon. Estimated length." He paused, rechecking the numbers because they seemed impossible. 47 kilometers. Across the station, other sensor operators were reaching the same impossible conclusion. Within minutes, alerts began flowing to military commands, diplomatic offices, and news organizations. Something unprecedented was approaching the assembly station. In the main chamber, War Chief Gorath stood at the central podium delivering a speech about Draven's superiority. He had spent the past hour explaining to the assembled delegates why resistance to the Empire was futile. Several species representatives had congratulated him on his firm handling of the human situation. Earth's surrender was expected within the next few hours, as their 72-hour deadline approached its end. The chamber's main displays suddenly flickered. Every screen, regardless of which delegation controlled it, switched to show the same thing: external sensor view, a tactical plot showing the space around the assembly station. And then it appeared. The Resilience dropped out of faster-than-light travel 500,000 kilometers from the station. At that range, optical sensors could capture clear images. The vessel filled the displays, its scale apparent even from that distance. Running lights illuminated the hull, revealing a structure so massive that several delegates initially thought it must be a space station that had somehow moved. Absolute silence fell across the assembly chamber. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species simply stared at the screens, their minds struggling to process what they were seeing. War Chief Gorath's speech died mid-sentence. His mouth remained open, but no sound emerged. Helen Bradford sat in the human section, watching the reactions carefully. She had seen preliminary designs and images of the Resilience, but even she felt a moment of awe at the full reality. This was what humanity had built. This was the secret they had kept for 35 years. A Draven military analyst stumbled into the chamber, his scales showing colors that indicated panic. He rushed to Gorath's side and began speaking rapidly in their native language. Helen's translation software picked up fragments, impossible tonnage, sensor readings beyond anything in their database. fighter complement larger than entire fleets. The Tellarian science delegation erupted in excited chatter. Their representatives were pulling up calculations, running numbers, trying to understand the engineering required to build something of that scale. One of them looked directly at Helen, his expression mixing respect with something approaching fear. An Orinthian merchant delegate dropped the data pad he had been holding. His species had built their fortune on trade and economic leverage. They understood the industrial capacity required to construct what they were seeing. If humanity could build this, what else had they built? How badly had they miscalculated Earth's economic power? Helen stood slowly, waiting until the attention in the room shifted to her. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. Honored delegates, I present the Terran United Space Command Vessel Resilience, humanity's answer to the question of how we will respond to threats against our people and our sovereignty. Goreth finally found. His voice, this changes nothing. The Draven Empire does not fear human tricks and deception. Helen smiled, an expression that didn't reach her eyes. This is no trick, War Chief. The resilience is simply what Earth decided to build while your empire was busy congratulating itself on past victories. We learned an important lesson when we joined the galactic community. Respect is not freely given, it must be earned. She pulled up additional data on the main displays. Technical specifications appeared alongside the images. Strike craft complement, 4,000. Support vessels, 600. Battle cruiser escorts, 40. Personnel capacity, 200,000. Self-sufficient operational duration, 20 years without resupply. As you can see, Helen continued, we took your lessons to heart. The galaxy respects power, so we built power. You taught us that showing weakness invites aggression, so we ensured we would never appear weak again. A delegate from a smaller species, one that had been bullied by the Draven for decades, started a slow, rhythmic gesture that among his people indicated approval. Others joined in. Not everyone in the assembly had enjoyed the established power structure. Gorath's communication device began chiming urgently. Helen knew what those messages contained. Draven fleet commanders near Earth's colonies had received updated intelligence. They were being ordered to withdraw immediately. The calculus had changed dramatically. The resilience, Helen said, her voice carrying a note of satisfaction, is one of 7 such vessels currently under construction. Earth has no intention of threatening peaceful species. We seek cooperation, trade, and mutual respect. But we will not be bullied, we will not surrender our colonies, and we will not apologize for ensuring our own security. She looked directly at Gorath. Your ultimatum is rejected. If the Draven Empire wishes to pursue what you call educational warfare, the Resilience and her battle group are ready to provide lessons in modern naval combat. I suspect those lessons would be quite different from what your commanders expect. The war chief seemed to shrink slightly. Around him, his military advisors were frantically updating their tactical assessments. The numbers didn't lie. Even if the Draven committed their entire sector fleet, the battle would be devastating, and they were beginning to understand that what they had seen of Earth's capabilities had been carefully controlled. If humans had hidden this, what else had they hidden? News networks across the galaxy were already broadcasting images of the resilience. Within hours, every civilized world would know that the balance of power had shifted. The species that everyone had dismissed as newcomers, the humans who had been mocked for their small, visible fleet, had just revealed themselves as a major military force. Helen sat back down, her work complete. The 72 hours had been used well. Earth had made its statement in the most undeniable way possible. Now the galaxy would have to adjust to a new reality where humanity was not a minor player to be pushed around, but a power to be respected and, if necessary, feared. The emergency broadcast interrupted regular programming on 600 planets across the galaxy. News anchors from dozens of species scrambled to provide context for images that seemed to defy explanation. The resilience dominated every screen, every feed, every conversation. On the Draven homeworld, the High Military Council convened in emergency session. General Torven pulled up tactical displays showing the human vessel from multiple angles. His career had been built on understanding enemy capabilities and exploiting weaknesses. He saw no weakness here. Our intelligence failed completely, Torven admitted to the assembled commanders. We assumed human mining operations in their outer system were producing materials for colony infrastructure. We never considered they might be building something of this magnitude. The youngest general in the room, recently promoted based on aggressive tactics against smaller species, spoke up. Surely our fleet can overwhelm one vessel, regardless of its size. Torven pulled up comparative analysis. The Resilience carries more strike craft than our entire 7th Fleet. Its point defense systems could intercept every missile we could launch within effective range, and these specifications suggest they have 7 more of these vessels under construction. He paused, letting that sink in. We chose the wrong species to intimidate. War Chief Gorath had already been recalled to the homeworld. His political career was over. The empire that had won 47 consecutive conflicts through overwhelming force was now facing an opponent that could match and exceed their strength. The High Council would spend months debating their next move, but the conclusion was already clear. The Draven Empire would need to pursue diplomacy with Earth, not domination. Across the galaxy, in the gleaming research towers of the Tellarian Science Collective, Professor Winrath examined the technical data that Earth had publicly released about the Resilience. Her team had been working non-stop since the reveal, trying to understand the engineering principles involved. Look at the modular construction approach, she told her assembled researchers. Each section was built independently, then assembled in space. It's brilliant in its simplicity. Why didn't we think of this? One of her junior scientists pulled up comparison data. Because our species spent thousands of years refining single-hull construction techniques, we became so good at our traditional methods that we never questioned them. Humans had no traditional methods. They looked at the problem with completely fresh perspectives. Winrath nodded slowly. And their AI integration. They used artificial intelligence to coordinate systems that would require thousands of dedicated operators in our vessels. They solved the crew size problem through automation rather than just adding more people. She felt something she had rarely experienced in her 300 years of life. Academic envy mixed with genuine admiration. Humanity had been part of the galactic community for only 4 decades. In that time, they had absorbed knowledge from hundreds of advanced civilizations, identified inefficiencies in established practices, and applied their own innovative approaches to create something unprecedented. Request a formal exchange program with Earth, Winrath ordered. I want our best engineers working alongside human designers. We have much to learn from them. The Orinthian Trade Federation responded to the Resilience's revelation with characteristic pragmatism. Within hours of the initial broadcast, merchant councils were recalculating the value of trade agreements with Earth. Minister Kravos addressed the Federation's Economic Assembly with urgent recommendations. We have severely undervalued human industrial capacity, he stated plainly. If they can build vessels of this scale, their manufacturing capability exceeds our previous estimates by factors of 10 or more. Earth is not a minor trading partner. They are a potential economic powerhouse. He pulled up resource, flow analysis. Review the raw materials humanity has been purchasing over the past 30 years. We thought they were building colonies. They were. But they were also building a military infrastructure that rivals anything in the galaxy. The economic implications are staggering. Trade delegations began preparing for immediate departure to Earth. New agreements would need to be negotiated. Fair agreements, based on accurate assessments of human capabilities rather than assumptions of weakness. The Orinthians had built their fortune on being early adapters to changing market conditions. They would not make the mistake of continuing to underestimate humanity. On smaller independent worlds, the reaction was markedly different. Vinara Station housed refugees from 6 different species that had been displaced by the Draven Empire's expansion. They gathered in communal spaces to watch the news broadcasts, many seeing hope for the first time in years. "They said no," a young Calarian whispered, his eyes fixed on images of the Resilience. "Earth told the Draven no, and the Draven backed down." His grandmother, who had fled her homeworld decades earlier, placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Someone finally had the strength to stand up to the bullies. Perhaps the galaxy is changing. Similar conversations happened across hundreds of marginalized communities. Species that had been forced to accept unfavorable terms from larger powers suddenly saw a new possibility. If humanity could build enough strength to defend themselves, perhaps others could too. Or perhaps Earth might be willing to extend its protection to those who needed it. Admiral Hayes watched the galactic response from the command center of the Resilience. Intelligence reports flowed in from Earth's diplomatic corps, tracking reactions from major and minor powers alike. The diversity of responses fascinated him. "The Draven are frightened," his intelligence officer reported. "The Tellarians want to learn from us. The Orinthians want to trade with us on equal terms, and the smaller species are looking to us as potential allies." Hayes considered this carefully. "We built the Resilience to ensure Earth's security, to make sure no one could threaten our people the way the Draven tried to threaten us. But I think we may have accidentally changed the galactic balance of power." His officer nodded. "We've received 43 formal requests for protection agreements from independent colonies, species that have no formal military alliances asking if Earth would consider defending them against aggression." That gave Hayes pause. Earth had built 7 supercarriers for self-defense. Now they were being asked to become protectors for others. It was a role humanity had never sought, but perhaps one they couldn't avoid. "Prepare a comprehensive analysis for Earth Command," Hayes ordered. "Include economic, military, and political implications of expanded protection agreements. If we're going to do this, we need to do it right." He looked out at the stars, thinking about how quickly everything had changed. 72 hours ago, the galaxy had viewed humanity as weak newcomers. Now they were seen as a major power, potentially the strongest single military force in known space. That brought opportunities, but also responsibilities. The Resilience had done exactly what it was designed to do. It had made the galaxy take Earth seriously. The question now was what humanity would do with that newfound respect. Would they use their power purely for defense, or would they expand their role to help others who faced the same threats Earth had faced? Hayes suspected that decision would define humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. And knowing his species, they would probably choose the harder path, the one that involved helping others, even when it wasn't strategically necessary. That was the human way. 3 months had passed since the Resilience emerged from Earth's outer system. Diana Foster ran final checks on her fighters' systems, preparing for what should have been a routine patrol. She commanded Strike Wing 7, 200 pilots from 15 different Earth nations, all trained to operate as a single coordinated unit. The distress signal changed everything. "All wings, this is Resilience Command. We have an emergency transmission from Halcyon Ridge Colony. Pirates from the frontier reaches are attacking civilian transports. The colony is requesting immediate assistance." Diana pulled up the navigation data. Halcyon Ridge was an independent settlement, not affiliated with any major power. Mixed species population, mostly refugees who had scraped together enough resources to establish a small mining operation on the edge of civilized space. No strategic value, no economic importance, just people trying to survive. Admiral Hayes appeared on her communication screen. "Captain Foster, I'm aware of the political situation. Halcyon Ridge has no formal alliance with Earth. Helping them gains us nothing diplomatically. Several advisors have suggested we maintain our current position and let the local authorities handle it." Diana waited. She knew Hayes well enough to recognize when he was building to a point. "However," Hayes continued, "we built the Resilience to protect people, Not just human people, not just strategically valuable people. I'm authorizing a task force deployment, 3 destroyers from our escort group and your strike wing. Show me what our pilots can do when it matters. Diana felt something settle in her chest. Pride, maybe, or just confirmation that she had chosen the right service to join. Understood, Admiral. Strike Wing 7 will be ready to launch in 15 minutes. The transit to Halcyon Ridge took 6 hours. Diana used the time to brief her pilots and review intelligence on Frontier Reach pirates. They operated in loose confederations, using outdated but functional warships to prey on undefended settlements. Their tactics relied on overwhelming weaker opponents quickly, taking what they wanted and disappearing before any organized response could arrive. They had never faced Earth's military before. Approaching target system, her navigation officer reported. Sensors are picking up multiple hostile contacts. Looks like they weren't expecting company. Diana could see the tactical situation developing on her displays. 15 pirate vessels, ranging from converted freighters to actual warships, were engaged in looting a convoy of civilian transports. 2 of the colony ships were venting atmosphere. Life pod signatures indicated survivors evacuating damaged vessels. All wings, this is Foster. Execute precision protocol. I want those pirate ships disabled, not destroyed. Targeting engines and weapon systems only. We're here to save lives, not take them. Her pilots acknowledged, spreading into attack formation. Human fighter doctrine emphasized speed and coordination. Unlike most galactic species who favored individual combat prowess, Earth's pilots operated in integrated units where each member played a specific role. The pirates noticed the incoming strike craft too late to mount effective resistance. Diana's wing hit the first vessel with electromagnetic pulse missiles that fried its control systems without breaching the hull. The ship went dark, drifting harmlessly as its crew scrambled to restore basic life support. Target 2 weapons disabled, one of her squadron leaders reported. Target 3 attempting to flee, pursuit units engaging. Diana watched her tactical display with satisfaction. Each pirate vessel was being methodically neutralized. Her pilots were following doctrine perfectly. Disable the threat, preserve life, maintain control of the engagement. The 3 Earth destroyers were hanging back, ready to intervene if needed, but letting the fighters demonstrate their capabilities. Within 20 minutes, all 15 pirate vessels were disabled and drifting. Not one had been destroyed. Casualty reports showed minimal loss of life even among the pirates themselves. Diana ordered her boarding teams to begin securing the vessels and taking prisoners for transfer to colonial authorities. The rescue operation took longer. Diana's pilots worked alongside Halcyon Ridge's own emergency services to evacuate damaged transports and provide medical assistance. Several species she didn't recognize worked side by side with human rescue teams, united in the basic task of saving lives. A Tellarian observer ship had been monitoring the entire engagement. Diana noticed them launching sensor drones to record the human tactical approach. Within days, analysis of this engagement would spread across multiple military academies. Earth's emphasis on precision and restraint would be studied, debated, and probably copied by species who recognized its effectiveness. Admiral Hayes contacted her directly once the situation was secure. Well done, Captain. You accomplished the mission with exactly 0 friendly casualties and minimal hostile casualties. That's the standard I want established. We have the power to obliterate our enemies. We choose to be better than that. Diana thought about his words as she supervised the transfer of captured pirates to Halcyon Ridge authorities. The colony's leadership was expressing gratitude, but she could also see something else in their faces. Hope. They had sent a distress signal expecting no response. The major galactic powers didn't care about independent colonies on the frontier. Earth had cared enough to send help. Within a week, similar distress calls began arriving at an accelerating rate. 6 more colonies requested assistance against various threats, raiders, pirates, aggressive neighbors. The galaxy's marginalized populations were starting to believe that someone might actually help them. Hayes called a senior staff meeting to discuss the situation. Diana attended as one of his combat commanders, listening as intelligence officers presented analysis of the growing requests. "We have the capacity to respond," one analyst noted. "The resilience alone could project power across dozens of systems. With our other supercarriers coming online, we could establish a protection network covering hundreds of independent worlds." "The question," Hayes said carefully, "is whether that's our role. Earth built these vessels for self-defense. Are we now becoming the galaxy's security force?" Diana surprised herself by speaking up. "Admiral, I've been thinking about this. Every one of those colonies asking for help is in the position Earth was in 3 months ago, vulnerable, outmatched, hoping someone with power would choose to do the right thing rather than the profitable thing. We know how that feels." Hayes nodded slowly. "We do, and I think that gives us perspective the established powers lack. They've been strong for so long they've forgotten what it's like to be weak." The decision was made to present a proposal to Earth's government. Establish a coalition of independent worlds with Earth providing military protection in exchange for mutual support and cooperation. Not an empire, but a genuine alliance based on shared interest in stability and security. Diana returned to her pilots, knowing their workload was about to increase significantly. Strike Wing 7 would be deploying more frequently, protecting colonies across a growing network of allied worlds. It wasn't what she had expected when she joined Earth's military, but watching the gratitude on faces from a dozen different species, seeing hope replace fear, she realized it was exactly what she had signed up for. The resilience had revealed itself as a weapon. Now it would prove itself as something more, a shield for those who needed protection, a symbol that power could be used to help rather than dominate. The galaxy was learning that humanity's greatest strength wasn't just the ships they built, but the choices they made about how to use them. 12 months after the Resilience first appeared at Castor Assembly Station, the galaxy gathered again. This time, the meeting took place aboard the Supercarrier itself. 300 species sent representatives to what would become known as the Accord Summit, and the symbolism was not lost on anyone present. Helen Bradford walked through the Resilience's diplomatic sector, watching delegates from across the galaxy explore the vessel that had changed everything. A year ago, many of these same beings had laughed at Earth's perceived weakness. Now they navigated carefully maintained corridors, speaking respectfully to human personnel, treating Earth as the major power it had proven itself to be. The summit chamber occupied a large section of the carrier's central hub. Unlike traditional galactic meeting spaces that emphasized hierarchy through seating arrangements, Earth had designed this room with a circular configuration. Every delegation sat at the same level, facing inward toward a central display area. The message was clear. This was a meeting of equals. Helen took her position as Earth's primary representative. Around her, delegates settled into their places. The Draven Empire's new diplomatic corps, carefully selected to replace the aggressive officials who had led the failed intimidation attempt. The Tellarian Science Collective, whose researchers had spent the past year collaborating with human engineers. The Orinthian Trade Federation, now Earth's largest commercial partner. And representatives from 47 independent colonies that had joined what was being called the Coalition for Mutual Defense. Admiral Hayes stood to open the proceedings. He wore his dress uniform, but Helen noticed he had chosen to wear minimal decorations. The resilience floating outside the windows spoke louder than any medals could. "Honored delegates," Hayes began, "a year ago Earth revealed capabilities that shocked the galactic community. We did so not out of aggression but necessity. We had been threatened, dismissed, and underestimated. The resilience was our answer to those who believed humanity could be pushed around." He paused, letting his words settle. "Since then, we've learned something important. Power creates responsibility. When you have the capability to help others, choosing not to help becomes a choice in itself. Earth has decided we cannot, in good conscience, stand by while others face the same threats we faced." Helen activated the central display. A proposal appeared, translated simultaneously into dozens of languages and communication formats. The Galactic Protection Initiative, a framework for preventing aggressive expansion, establishing protected trade zones, and ensuring smaller species could not be bullied by larger powers. The initiative has three core principles, Helen explained. First, no species may use military force to seize territory or resources from another species. Second, independent colonies have the right to self-governance free from external coercion. Third, disputes between species will be resolved through arbitration rather than warfare. A Draven delegate raised a clawed hand. Helen recognized him as someone known for pragmatic thinking rather than bluster. And how would these principles be enforced? Through the Coalition fleet, Hayes answered. Earth currently has 7 supercarriers operational, with more under construction. Each carrier commands a battle group capable of responding to aggression anywhere in civilized space. Coalition members contribute support vessels, intelligence resources, and staging facilities. Together, we create a deterrent significant enough that no single power would dare violate the initiative. The room erupted in discussion. Helen had expected resistance from the established powers, but the year since the Resilience's reveal had changed calculations. The Draven Empire had attempted to maintain their aggressive posture for 3 months before economic and political realities forced them to reconsider. Other species had watched carefully and drawn their own conclusions. Over the next 6 hours, delegates debated every aspect of the proposal: voting procedures, enforcement mechanisms, rights of coalition members versus non-members. Earth had prepared for these discussions, working with coalition partners to develop frameworks that addressed legitimate concerns while maintaining core principles. Finally, as the station's day cycle began to dim, a vote was called. The initiative required approval from 2/3 of attending species to take effect. Helen watched the tallies appear on her display. Smaller species voted overwhelmingly in favor. Independent colonies were unanimous. Even some traditional powers, recognizing the changing reality, added their support. The final count appeared: 78% approval. The Galactic Protection Initiative was now official policy, backed by the combined strength of Earth's fleet and supported by the majority of civilized space. Helen allowed herself a moment of satisfaction before diving into the next phase: implementation. The details that would determine whether this new framework actually changed anything or just became another layer of galactic bureaucracy. Diana Foster watched the vote results from the observation deck where her pilots had gathered. They had spent the year protecting colonies, responding to emergencies, and demonstrating that Earth's military power came with restraint and purpose. Now that work was being formalized into something larger. "Think this will actually work?" one of her squadron leaders asked. Diana considered the question carefully. "I think it gives smaller species hope. That's worth something. Whether it prevents all conflict, probably not. But if it prevents some species from being conquered or exploited, then yes, it works." Her pilots nodded. They had seen firsthand what the coalition meant to vulnerable populations: trading routes that were now protected, colonies that could develop without fear of being absorbed by larger empires, species that finally had a voice backed by meaningful power. Admiral Hayes found Helen after the formal proceedings concluded. They stood together at a window overlooking the stars, watching smaller vessels move between the Resilience and various delegation ships. "We built 7 supercarriers to protect Earth," Hayes said quietly. "Somehow they became the foundation for protecting the entire galaxy. How did that happen?" Helen smiled. "Because we remembered what it felt like to be vulnerable. The Draven and other major powers had been strong for so long they forgot. We never did. That memory made us empathetic in ways they couldn't be." Hayes nodded slowly. "The galaxy expected a warship. We gave them hope instead. I suppose that's the most human thing we could have done." Below them, in the vast hangar bays of the Resilience, pilots from a dozen species trained alongside Diana's human squadrons. In the diplomatic sectors, Representatives from hundreds of worlds worked on implementing the new framework. In the research labs, Tellarian scientists collaborated with Earth's engineers on next-generation technologies. And in the command centers, intelligence officers monitored the galaxy for threats against any coalition member. The Resilience had been designed as a weapon, 47 kilometers of military power meant to ensure Earth's survival, but it had become something more, a city in space where different species worked together, a symbol that strength could be used to protect rather than dominate, a demonstration that power combined with principle could reshape the galaxy. Helen looked at the latest reports, more colonies requesting coalition membership, trade agreements being negotiated on fair terms, scientific exchanges breaking down old barriers. The Draven Empire was even sending student pilots to learn human tactical doctrine, a development that would have seemed impossible a year ago. The galaxy will never be perfect, Helen said. There will still be conflicts, still be challenges. But for the first time in thousands of years, the smaller species have a voice that matters. That's worth everything we built. Hayes raised his glass in a quiet toast. To the Resilience, may she never fire her weapons in anger, and may her very existence prevent the need. Outside the windows, Earth's supercarrier hung against the stars, a testament to what humanity had accomplished. They had been underestimated, dismissed as newcomers with nothing to offer. In response, they had built something unprecedented, not just in scale but in purpose. 7 vessels powerful enough to dominate, used instead to liberate and protect. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their weapons. It was their refusal to become like those who had once threatened them. They had power now, more than most species had imagined possible, and they chose, every day, to use that power to help others rather than dominate them. That choice, more than any supercarrier, would define Earth's legacy in the stars.